Hi there, welcome to HR Shop Talk. I'm Andrea Adams, and we talk about all things HR here with smart, experienced, successful professionals who are doing the work. You can also find me on YouTube, where you can interact with me and others like yourself. Today, my guest is again Irina Ketkin. Irina is an L&D professional. She teaches courses on Udemy, which is how I found her. She also has a YouTube channel of her own called the L&D Academy, which is super smart and well produced. Hi, Irina, how are you?
Hi, Andrea. I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on. I learned so much in the last episode we did. Honestly, I'm excited in particular about this one. So I called this course development, in my intro. Is there a better word for course development?
You're more than welcome to keep calling it course development. However, the official term is instructional design. And there's a bit of a caveat to it because instructional design is usually used or is referred as the process of creating online courses. But the truth is that same process is used in face-to-face or offline courses as well. So yeah, instructional design, or like I said, course development. Course development, or the development part of it, is just one part of the overall process for instructional design. So yeah, you can continue calling it course development, or you can refer to the overall process, which is instructional design.
Probably this is not a course, or this is not a discussion about all the steps of instructional design, but seeing as you mentioned it, what are the steps in instructional design?
Yeah. So there are quite a few frameworks or models that you can look into, but probably the most famous one is ADDIE, which is ADDIE. It's an acronym for the stages that you would go through when creating a course. And it starts with analyzing the learning needs, then designing the actual intervention and getting some feedback on it, developing in the offline world. These can be a bit interchangeable, or they can be interchangeably used. For learning, which is happening online, these are usually two separate stages where you first design it, you get some feedback, and then you develop the actual course. Like I said, for offline events, these two can be a bit interchangeable because you would sit down, design it, get some feedback, continue designing it until you reach the I stage, which is the implementation. For online courses, this means uploading it onto your learning management system. For offline courses, this means actually delivering it or facilitating the session. And then finally, the E stands for evaluation, which is where you kind of go back over the entire process. You go back to your stakeholders, you go back to your learners, and you ask them essentially one question: what was the impact of this learning event that you just went through? So yeah, this is the ADDIE model. Like I said, there are quite a few frameworks out there, but this is the most popular one: analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation.
I didn't realize, and honestly, I never really gave it a whole lot of thought, that aside from the technology, there's a different process for developing in-person content versus digital content.
So it's different and it's not different at the same time. It's different, as you say, because from a purely technological perspective, when you're creating an online course, there are a lot of different things that you need to take into account. What is the learning management system? What kind of formats does it support? And I don't want to get too technical here because you can go in a lot of detail here and kind of go down this spiral of endless technological mumbo jumbo. When it comes to offline courses, it's a lot more about the interaction. How are you going to design that interaction? How are you going to get the best outcome, or the best learning outcome rather, from the participants? That same interaction in online courses lives in a slightly different manner, in a slightly different format. There, you're more or less kind of restricted, if I can use that word, although instructional designers, e-learning designers, please don't come after me, but you are in essence restricted because there are only so many interactions you can do drag and drop, you can do match, you can do quizzes. Whereas with an offline event, the possibilities are essentially limitless. You can have a debrief session, you can have a simulation, a role play, which we talked about last time that you said you hated. There's so many different things that you can do in a face-to-face session. And so if you look at the start of the process and the end of the process, those should be relatively the same. You would still start with analyzing the needs. You still need to understand who your audience is. You need to understand what challenge they're trying to solve through this learning intervention. You're still trying to figure out what's the best way for them to get to where they want to go or to get to their goal. And the evaluation is the same. You essentially need to help them, or rather you need to help yourself understand what impact this has had on you, on the learners, on their managers, on their performance, engagement, or whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. It's the part in the middle, I guess, that has some differences.
Just a quick couple follow-up questions. The design activities. I have design training, and I just wanted to go somewhere where I could get just ideas on different activities we could do, let's say around communication, seeing communication, or I don't know, planning or whatever. Mm-hmm. Is there online places we can go to learn to get more ideas?
Oh my God, yes.
I bet there are.
There are just so many. I'm almost hesitant to recommend either one of them because there are just so many great ones out there. Even if you just Google icebreaker activities or training activities for blank topic, there are just so many out there. As a matter of fact, just today, I found a LinkedIn post of someone who was recommending a bunch of decks, about a bunch of facilitation decks that you can use. Some of them were paid, some of them were completely free, that you can use with participants in an offline session or a virtual session to get them to talk or to open up or to analyze certain experiences that they went through. So there are just so many. I don't want to recommend either one of them because I'm afraid of either not mentioning all the great ones or someone coming after me and saying, hey, you forgot about this one.
You also talked about evaluation, and I think you said there is ultimately one thing you need to know. Yeah. Okay, how do you find that out? How do you know that your course has actually made an impact?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And it's one that a lot of L&D people keep asking themselves. Yeah. And it's a tricky question because there are many different things that you can be measuring. But And here's the truth. There is a framework for everything out there. There's a model for everything out there. The infamous, I don't know if it's infamous, but it's definitely popular, Kirkpatrick's 4 levels, where he says you essentially need to be measuring at 4 different levels. You need to be measuring their reactions immediately after the training or whatever learning intervention. You need to be measuring the learning, how much they know, what knowledge they've retained. You need to measure their behaviors. In other words, how in the longer term, their behaviors have changed. And you need to measure the results, how the company benefited from it. And like I said, this is one of the many different frameworks that you can use to figure out what to measure. To me, however, the framework itself is not as important as understanding that evaluation doesn't happen at the end of your design journey. It actually starts at the very beginning, because your analysis should include the goals that you're setting up for your learning intervention, so that at the end, you can simply ask, hey, did we meet those goals? Let me just give you a very quick example. Let's say that someone approaches you and says, hey, Andrea, I want you to design a training for us on negotiation skills, okay? And you say, great, I can show you all these wonderful techniques and all that. And you design a training for them. And then at the end, you ask, what did you learn? And they say, well, we learned these techniques. And you say, okay, great. And what impact has that had on you? And they said, well, we don't really know, or it has had a very small impact, or, oh, we actually increased our sales by, I don't know, 10%. But you actually shouldn't be asking what impact you're looking to achieve at the end. You need to be asking that at the very beginning. You need to say, okay, great. So we are doing this negotiation skills training for you. So what outcomes would you like to achieve by the end of this course?
Mm.
And they'll tell you, well, we want to learn new techniques. So then you focus on new techniques. Or they tell you, we want to increase our sales. So you focus on things that will help people increase their sales. And so by the end of it, when you get to the evaluation part, you're not asking what impact this has had on you. You're asking, by how much have your sales increased, or by how much has your performance increased? So evaluation, even though it's almost a separate stage at the end of the process, it's actually something you start with from the very beginning. And again, it doesn't really matter which framework you use, as long as you're thinking about evaluation from the moment someone has identified a learning need.
Okay, so way back when, I actually, at the start of my career, took an instructional design course. I don't know if it was called that, but anyway, at that course, I was told that there's a 1 to 12 rule of thumb, 1 hour of delivery and 12 hours of preparation for that 1 hour. I mean, I don't know if you've heard of this rule, but what's your experience in the amount of time you're going to spend preparing to actually deliver a course versus delivering it?
Yeah, that is very interesting to me. I have to admit, I haven't heard of this rule of thumb, but it definitely checks out.
Okay.
I track every single minute that I spent on any task. And so for the past 5 years, I have a lot of data to back this up. And I can tell you that, again, based on purely my experience, 1 hour of design, 1 hour of any sort of learning intervention, be that a training, a workshop, a discussion even, usually takes me anywhere between 10 to 15 hours of preparation, rehearsals, getting through the needs analysis, understanding what impact we're chasing, understanding the goals, understanding the success measures. So there is actually a lot of preparation that goes into 1 hour of, again, be that training or a course or a workshop or whatever it may be. I didn't know it was 1 to 12, but it definitely checks out based on my experience.
Like, it's a lot of investment in that time. So we've established, the 1 to 12 is probably reasonable anyway. It's big investment. When should organizations, put that investment in internally using their own staff versus just go out and find someone to deliver whatever course and do it externally?
Yeah. So you would normally do it internally if you have the know-how and the capacity. It's really as simple as that. If you have an internal instructional designer and they have the time, they have the resource to create a course for you, again, regardless if it's online or a classroom session, if that person has the know-how and the capacity to do that, then it's a good investment to do it, because you're paying that person a salary anyway, so it's not an extra expense to you, essentially. However, there is a case for bringing in an external person, and again, it's up to not having capacity and or not having the know-how. Specifically for classroom sessions, I don't necessarily think it's the case or it's that relevant for online courses, but for classroom sessions, there could be one more reason why you would bring in an external vendor, and that is whenever you need to bring in a fresh perspective, someone who has dealt with many different companies, has experience in many different industries, and so you were essentially bringing in that person to share their knowledge, their point of view, their perspective, and help the people in that training room think differently, to look at things from a new perspective, from a fresh perspective, which can have a really profound effect on innovation, on creative thinking, all those buzzwords. But yeah, you know what I mean.
Well, the know-how, having the know-how, I would actually think that it would be more it would be rare actually that the instructional designer would have the know-how. I mean, you exist in the world, so you and I, we have, let's take, for example, your negotiation skill. You and I have maybe some basic negotiation skill, but not enough to teach somebody about it. So
that's a good point. You caught me. So when I said know-how, I don't mean the content know-how. I mean the process know-how.
Okay.
So here's the thing. If you only want to have training done by people who have been doing the same thing day in and day out for 20 years, you're never going to be able to find good trainers, because those subject matter experts, they also need to be good instructional designers, they need to be good trainers, they need to be good facilitators. And it's very rare that these two worlds collide and overlap to create the perfect trainer. And even then, that trainer would only focus on this one area, right? But what you want to do, and this is, by the way, key for any hiring manager out there, if you want a learning and development person who can do all of these trainings that your company needs, they don't need to know the actual processes or the actual systems or the actual tools or the actual mechanics or instruments and tools and frameworks and all that. They need to know how to learn it and then present it in a way that people will take away that knowledge and really use it effectively. So essentially, it's about being a really good instructional designer and a really good trainer.
Okay, so back to the negotiation example, it sounds to me like
if you know how to figure out what good negotiation is, then you should be good to go.
Okay, but you also have to, teaching me negotiation, for example, versus teaching someone who's been a lawyer for 10 years about negotiation. You're focusing training on me versus focusing on that lawyer is going to be very different.
There we go. So that's actually a wonderful example. Let's work with this a little bit. So let's say you do have to prepare a training on negotiation skills for a group of lawyers, and they definitely have a much higher standard, right? They need to know a lot more in-depth stuff. So the question then for let's call them the L&D person, because they could have a range of different titles there. But the task for the L&D person then is to figure out what those learning needs are specifically, down to the last detail, right? And then either they go and upskill themselves by talking to experts, by reading books, by signing up to courses, by whatever the case may be, or they say, I don't think I can deliver on this. I don't think I can do this. Let me find someone external.
Okay.
So it's not as much about, I can actually tell you what I would do in that situation. If I'm put on the spot and I need to deliver a negotiation skills training for a group of lawyers, I would probably attend the closest chapter of any one of those mediation groups.
Yeah.
Because they have very in-depth courses on that, certification courses on that. And I would actually sign up to one of those because they work with a lot of real life cases with a lot of lawyers. So I know that if I have the time specifically, I can do that. And I can bring that knowledge back into the organization.
To be an instructional designer, what kind of training do you need?
Ooh, I love that question. So the simple answer to that question is, I don't know. Because again, if you're looking for just a formal training, there are just so many amazing resources out there, so many amazing course providers, so many amazing programs that you can sign up to or enroll to. But I think if you want to become a really good instructional designer, I think the best way is to learn by doing. And sometimes that could mean something as simple as facilitating your next team meeting or attending a seminar and then sharing that knowledge with the rest of your team, or even organizing a team building event for your department. all of these things would essentially contribute to your competency as an instructional designer. If nothing else, then download, if you want to become an instructional designer for online courses, download any one of those authoring tools and just play around with it. See what you can do. Learn and Google stuff. That's the best way. There's so many amazing professionals out there, really, really keen on sharing their expertise. So learn from them. Find them on LinkedIn and learn from them.
You talked about authoring tools. Seeing as I've never developed an online course, this is new to me. What is an authoring tool?
So this is the software that you would use to create the online course. One very simple example is Articulate or Articulate Storyline, They essentially allow you to design a course, put a navigational menu, create certain games and activities within that. And then you would download it off of that software and then upload it onto your learning management system. So, for example, if you've ever had to take a compliance course, chances are it was developed on a learning authoring tool.
Okay, that is amazing. We're just about to the end here. Do you have any other thoughts or suggestions to share with the audience before we totally wrap up?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to work in instructional design, or if you want to develop courses, it can be a very rewarding field. However, remember that it can also be very frustrating at times because there are just so many things that could go wrong, including from the very start. One favorite example is when a manager comes to you and says, hey, can you take these PowerPoint slides and turn them into an online course? Or someone comes to you and says, hey, we're having some communication issues in our team. Can you do a training for the team? And so there are a lot of things that can go wrong, and it can be at times a very frustrating experience, and that's the crucial bit, it can be so rewarding at the end when you walk into that room, when you see that aha moment, when you see that light bulb go off.
Yes,
that's when you can truly say, hey, this is what I was living for. That's the moment that makes it everything, well worth it. So if you want to do it, do it. Make sure you know what you're getting yourself into and just do it.
Well, thanks, Irina. I have seen the light bulb go off in some of the training I've delivered, but now I have some methods for making sure that happens just a little bit more often. We have reached the end of this episode. Thanks for listening out there. We're going to catch you next time when I talk shop with another insightful guest.